Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Now, while political and economic ties between Poland and the United States often make headlines, the quieter bonds formed through economic exchange may be even more enduring. Fulbright scholar Kelly Ritter has just completed her term at the University of Warsaw, where her works in literature, community outreach, and cultural engagement left a lasting impression. Joining us today on TVP World is Professor Kelly Ritter of Northern Kentucky University, an advocate for deeper economic connections and cultural discovery. Hello, ma'am, and welcome to TVP World.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, quick question. What first inspired you to choose Poland of all places for your Fulbright journey? Was there a personal or academic spark there?
Well, I grew up in a small place right next to Pittsburgh, and there's a big Polish community there. So all the churches would have pierogi bakes, and my sister-in-law was Polish, so I had those ties. So I did that first because I was in love with Poland. But secondly, I found a university that could use some of my skills to teach creative writing.
Right, speaking of your skills in creative writing, we do know that you teach created two different classes in Warsaw University. What is it about, and how did the Polish students respond?
Excellent question. Well, I created one class for the graduate program and one for the undergraduate program, and essentially what we were going to do is write our own poetry and memoir, sit in a circle and share it with one another. And at first the students were kind of like, okay, so I have to tell my innermost emotions and all of my secrets to strangers.
It's probably very different from the culture in the United States, right? We're more used to people being open and perhaps a little bit oversharing from time to time, but for Polish students, that's probably a bit different.
Absolutely. I saw a doctor here for my neck, and I sat down and she said, so what's the problem? And I proceeded to tell her my entire life story. And she's like, okay, so you have a pain in your neck. Yes.
So is that the kind of major difference you swap between the Polish students and those from you're used to teaching in the United States? So if you were to compare the two, how would you kind of go about it?
Well, I think in the United States, while we're very used to perhaps sitting in a circle, writing creatively, and even sharing trauma with one another, when I was here, the students actually wanted more directness. So while in America we are okay with sharing our lives, maybe we want to kind of be told about improvements and such in a roundabout way. So maybe you should think about this if you like this. And the Polish students taught me very early on that they find it to be kind of more honest, to be direct and say what I think, and they would respect me more. So that helped me as a person too.
That's actually something I kind of observe here as well. There's sort of an interesting, brutal honesty about the Poles where they're not very shy about kind of being real with how they feel and what they think, which kind of make life a little bit easier, I would imagine. You also visited high schools and various community groups as well. Can you help us understand why it's important for you to have these connections beyond just the academic aspect of things?
Absolutely. I remember walking into one high school and there were students with booths with American flags and balloons, and they were dressed as cowboys. We even had a George Washington, and there was this huge celebration of America. And I was kind of scared that Americans were going to be viewed in a kind of negative way. So to see that we could be celebrated, and that people-to-people contact right now, when there's things like wars and division, no matter what your political stance may be, I think right now we need more people connecting with people, especially during this time.
Right. Do you feel like there's a craving for these type of people-to-people connections, especially after the lockdown of the pandemic era?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, a lot of students perhaps were of that COVID period where they were extremely isolated. And what I'm definitely going to take back to my students in America is I noticed something totally different here. When I walk into the university in America, students are kind of sitting by themselves with their phones or laptops and no one's talking. I notice when I'm here, the students, even when they're waiting between classes, they're in groups. they're talking. When I walk through parks, people are talking. When I go to cafes, people are talking. So I think we crave it in America, but I don't think we're doing it quite yet.
So what's your kind of most unexpected or surprising impression of Polish culture during your time here?
Well, I was told that the Polish people don't smile and may be cold at first. And I actually found that, okay, well, walking on the streets, perhaps they're not smiling like Americans do. But when you sit down with someone, you're going to receive the kind of warmest hospitality that I have ever received in my life. And I had this opportunity to also work twice a week in an adoption center right outside of Warsaw. Adopcja Uzianzi, I'm sorry if I can't say it correctly, but not only was I able to connect with people outside of academia and get to know them well, but I was able to work with dogs. They did speak Polish, so
probably better than you.
Right, but it was an experience that also was life-changing.
Amazing. Now, I want to go a little bit into your work as well, since your poetry project is inspired by some Polish artists as well, right? Can you help us unpack that a little bit? What drew you to that particular subject? Who is your inspiration?
Yes. So there's this really famous Polish mime, and I won't butcher his name, and he created an entire way of movement and doing kind of collective mime performances. And the reason why this is important to me is that as a poet, I've been very, very invested in the idea of silence, going to Trappist monasteries, studying silence for weeks at a time, taking vows of silence, because as a poet, the white space of the page is already occupied by silence. And to think about silence in this other way, in an entire country that historically had to be silenced over and over again and then be resilient from that silence, and how I personally have been silenced in my life, and to learn from what Poland has gone through. So that's my next project, is to kind of delve into his work and use it for my next poetry collection.
Amazing. Now, would you personally recommend more American scholars or even students come here to pursue their study? Do you think, well, there's enough Americans that's considering Central, Eastern Europe, or Poland in general as a destination?
Oh my gosh, yes. I've traveled a lot, and when you go to Poland, you have so many different regions and the best food I've ever tasted. But also I think in America, like the students sitting by themselves, isolated, we're out there by ourselves. We're pretty isolated. And I think coming here and interacting will be life-changing for them. All they have to do is kind of go to the museums, look at the history, experience what they've experienced through different film and media, but also the art and culture here. I mean, there's a museum almost every corner, the symphony, the opera, so there's so much they can get here that perhaps they don't have access to in rural America.
Right. And what about the academic perspective? Do you think that the Polish university is in a good enough standard to equip the American students from what they will be needing in their academic career?
Oh gosh, yes. The Polish students, not only do they have this incredible classic education, so they have this understanding, this vast understanding of literary, cultural, and heritage, but the way that they are educated, in America we're very discussion-based, so we talk about things, we love to think creatively about things, but we have a harder time kind of getting information and retaining it.
Okay.
And the students here, I would have to teach something once and they understood it. I never had to repeat it again. And so I think this entire different way of being educated would help them in the long run, so they can also think creatively but also be able to retain information.
That's very interesting. Yeah, the different countries have different approach when it comes to education, and perhaps you're not just learning individual skill but also a skill set that would help you in your future endeavors when it comes to, well, retaining information or how to process them as well. Do you find any like interesting stereotypes about Poland before you came here that turns out to be true or untrue? Anything interesting like that?
Well, I guess that I was thinking that they would be very conservative. I was looking at the percentage of how many Catholics there are in Poland, and so I was told that was the case. And there's just as much variety here, of course, as there is in America, and that's another reason for us not to only get the only information from the news. Mm-hmm. We have to step out and meet with people because everyone has these inner complex lives, these pains, these sorrows, these joys, and it's not all about agreeing with a certain point of view on the news or any kind of belief system. It really goes to people-to-people interaction.
It does sound like you had a very good time here, but we do know that you're also on the tail end of your stay here in Poland. Do you consider any sort of long-term academic or creative collaborations to continue with Poland?
Absolutely. Not only am I going to do my own creative project and keep coming back here to research in that way, but I plan to bring American students here in 2 years. And so we're going to do a program called Creative Writing in Poland. And they'll come here just to meet with students, meet with professors, go to different historical and cultural sites, and their only job is going to be able to soak it all in so that when they go back to America, they can write about Poland and kind of continue that exchange.
All right, in this case, last but not least, elevator pitch. If you were to convince a fellow American academic to apply for a Fulbright in Poland, 30 seconds, what do you say?
Best food, best transportation, best cultural events, best, you can walk every day, and you will be treated often like a celebrity.
Great. Well, that's a better endorsement than I could ever give. So thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Mm-hmm.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.